Excellent. So our topic this morning is shoot, it's gonna happen. Flex title. We're super happy that we have our two expert guests, Leslie. Say your last name. Mahovold. Leslie Mahovold, Melissa LaFlex. Excellent. These guys are gonna take it over. The slides are gonna require me to bump out of this in order to let people in from the waiting room. Hey, Caitlin or Hannah, somebody want to log in on your phone as PHT meeting so you can let people in, because this doesn't do it unless I click all the way out of the slides. Okay, I'm officially ready. Stand up here. Perfect. Okay. All right, and tell me when you're ready to move through the slides.
All right, welcome. For those that haven't met us, I'm Leslie, Melissa. We're excited to be here. We can make this as informal or formal as you want, so don't hesitate to interrupt or ask questions. You know that title can sometimes be boring, but we're just here to educate and help answer any questions along the way. We're going to talk about title commitments and settlement payment. So what is a title commitment? Ultimately, it's oh yeah. It's a promise to insure the title. So that's what we do. We issue title insurance day in and day out. And the commitment ultimately tells us what that we as a holder have to make sure your buyer has a police. How do we obtain information? Well, we have to hire a company, it's called an outsourcing company. They do a search of public records. It goes back 40 years. Unless it's foreign, it goes back to the prior foreign certificate. They provide us with the package of documents, and then at that time, we have an examiner that reviews it and then prepares the title. How do you review it? Where do you even start? And you obviously have to check the accuracy of it. Okay, so sure. So how to read it? So you schedule E. What it does is it tells you why your buyer's name will appear on the policy. What we do is we match the purchase agreement and the lender application. So the lender application matches what the purchase agreement says. So if it's Melissa LaFlex, that's how her name will appear on the purchase agreement. But if the buyer wants to take title in her trust and they call us, then we have to ask you for an amendment. So just be mindful of how they want their names to appear. If you put their full name.
Sorry.
Right.
All right.
If you put their full middle name on purchase agreement, their full name is gonna be on their loan documents and it's gonna be on their policy. Sometimes people come to closing and are like, why did you put my name like this? So it's just a reminder.
Hold on.
We're good.
Keep
We're
going.
good.
Okay.
We're good.
So it'll have the sales price, the amount of the new loan, all the sellers currently entitled, and then the legal description of the property. So Schedule B Part 2, this is kind of like our homework. So this tells us what we need to do to clear title. So it gives us any deed requirements and how we should draft our document. What outstanding mortgages are, if there's an association, any other liens, whether they're a federal or state tax lien, bankruptcy, judgment, and then any lien waiver retirement. So if your purchase agreement states that there's been work to be done to the property, or your seller's disclosure, or the MLS, the title commitment is always going to ask for it. So if your MLS says that, you know, recently remodeled kitchen, be expected that we're going to call you and say, hey, the buyer title company needs more information. When was the work done? And if it's older than, depending on the title company, 6 months to a year, we don't need anything. But if it's under that 90 days, we're gonna need a full foreign construction statement and the waivers and invoices for any work. We just recently had one that was a challenge because the owner was also the general contractor. She hired out all the work. She's had other title companies that allowed her to sign a lien waiver. Saying that everybody was paid, the buyer's title company, we wouldn't accept it either, but the buyer's title company was like, absolutely not. There's no guarantee that those subcontractors are paid when a general takes the full payment and says, oh, yep, everyone's good. That all of a sudden there could be a lien on the property that happens, so. a reminder on that.
Wait, what do you call the lien where, it's because a contractor put work on it? What's it
A
called?
mechanics lien.
Oh, yeah, does that actually involve mechanics in any way?
No.
No, see, now look at what an expert you can sound like when you do your fine. Mechanics lien refers to contracted work
Yep.
of the client.
Can I ask, is there any dollar amount associated with this when certain things want that to be exempt? So every title company is different. We have nothing where if it's under $500 and we have paid receipt, we're good with it. But we've closed with title companies that have asked for a $50 lien waiver. So we just, when we're representing the seller, we're always at the mercy of the buyer's title company. There's sometimes like, well, we just had one, CenterPoint put in a new furnace. And it was like, let's say $7,000. And generally, when you have CenterPoint involved or a electric or gas company, we can get away with just the paid receipts. And this title company wanted a lease waiver, and it was a little bit of a challenge to get that out of CenterPoint. Imagine. So there is no standard document that has to be issued by the company that's. Right, so there is a standard
Plain one
that we can provide, yeah. Sometimes it's like, let's say you're having a chimney replaced or something and you did it prior or during the listing. And you have a paid receipt, a good thing would be just to have that contractor sign the lien waiver at the same time. If you had any, rather than 2 days before closing when the buyer is asking for it, so that's been a discernment. Any other questions on that?
So if seller doesn't work themselves, it's not necessary to be the contractor.
Not necessary, but depending on the title company, they'll want to know the specifics of the work and then they'll want paid receipts. So depending on what is done, you know, like we had somebody that had like, fire, yeah, smoke detectors. And they made did us a receipt from Home Depot. It, again, it's dependent on the insuring company, so there's no hard and fast to say it's always done this way or it's always gonna be done this way. So the second part of the commitment is the Schedule B Part 2. Those are the exceptions to the commitment. So it references all the documents that we cannot insure. And then that they will not be covered, and it's just for their reference, so a lot of times you'll see, like if. Some people like in here. It'll show any, like, easements for drainage and utilities. Different things like that, levy assessment. We're making market this commitment to ensure that whether the purchase agreement that's paid or not paid, who's paying them, and then those fall off the policy. So, residents. Any questions on that? Sometimes people call and ask, can I get a copy of the covenant? Because it's helpful for their buyer as they're reviewing them, and do not hesitate to ask us for that. We just have to ask our abstracting company. We get them sometimes, they don't always give them, it just depends on how old they are. Sometimes we physically have to send somebody to the county to pick them up because they don't even copy that well.
I was curious if, special warranty deeds on properties or properties that, land that might be acquired in foreclosure or something like that. Is there a certain type of exception that for type of insurance? The builder like bought most of those land, developed on it, and then moved forward.
No,
Okay.
anything that's an exception. Like in your purchase agreement, or your buyer is gonna assume assessments, those are gonna stay on their final policy, right? If the seller is paying all the assessments, those will be gone. Okay. The next part is just a settlement statement, so obviously it's just a summary of everything that is like. And then on this, what we're just asking is that you kind of give it a once over and you're looking at it. What's important to you obviously is your commission, right? But you wanna, when we send it, we're just asking for you to take a look at it, make sure there's no questions. And then, ultimately be that expert your client also, you can always refer to us, but we want you to be armed with the information.
Okay.
So what you're looking at is your sale price. Was in a contract with the seller pay closing costs. Furnished money, commission, admin, assessment, warranty, and then anything miscellaneous. So if you were getting reimbursed for each way resale of the builder. Repair to that property. Just- That's kind of where we send them to, as your second set of eyes, is to ensure that sometimes we don't always get the amendment to, things get lost. And then if you just take a look at it and just ensure that it's there prior to voting.
I'm gonna jump in for a second. So, incentive for you to review the settlement statement is this is your sort of last and final chance to make sure that commission is being withheld from the transaction properly. Even if the contract says you're gonna pay a certain amount of commission, if it's not on the settlement statement, these guys can still attempt to go back to a client afterwards and collect some money. Or we can certainly sue them, but nobody wants to do that. So this is your chance to make sure that it's gonna come out and get dispersed correctly at closing. This is super important. If we get past the closing date, recouping that stuff is messy, it takes longer, and it's frankly just not as likely. Right? So definitely take a minute and review those numbers.
And then we get a form from EXP that says like what the commission should be, but sometimes you guys have negotiations, so if there's things that change. Make sure you're letting your TC know, because then we'll get a new updated form, because oftentimes like, Melissa was prepping for a file this morning. The commission disbursement agreement says 2.7, the closing worksheet says 1.5. And neither one of it was coming from the seller. The buyer was actually paying it, and they're in nowhere in the paperwork that anyone tell us that. So, over communicating is obviously always better, but in that case, we would have missed it. Because the purchase agreement said, zero commission paid to selling agent, and it's our buyer, and so we were like, oh, weird, there's something must have happened afterwards, and then Melissa's like, let's just double check and sent a message to the TC and said, hey, I see the commission on here says 2.7, one says 1.5, and the other agent telling us they're not changing anything, so what is it? Any questions on that? So, or how that process works, we send that final settlement statement out once Melissa wraps everything up with the lender. So, oftentimes on a seller file, we'll send out a prelim for you kind of to take a look at, to see if there's any questions. And then ultimately, once we receive that final from the buyer title company or from the buyer, we'll send it out. It'll include both sides, so you can see, you can check your commission even on a buyer file. Like I said, we do our best to go off those DDAs, and then to question the TPs if they don't match. But yeah, look at it also. This is just a little bit of a timeline, kind of explaining how things happen. So the file is open, and at that point, we send an introductory email. We place the order for the abstracting, and that's when the commitment is complete. We schedule a clear title, closing, and then the recording of final policy. I think sometimes there's confusion on how that works. But with the recording, right when the closing is done, we submit within 72 hours of recording of the documents, and then we issue that final policy. That's our product. That's what we're selling. That's what we're selling for money. So, any questions on that?
I heard once that 50% of your job is done prior to closing, and the second half is done after.
Yeah.
Is that accurate?
Yeah. Yeah, that's pretty fair. This is our team. So you obviously know Melissa and myself, really Egan, if you haven't met her, she's a great closer. Jacqueline does kind of our closing and our county stuff, and then Sophia Loescher is our closing assistant. All a wealth of knowledge, so please do not hesitate to reach out if there's ever any questions. Any one of us on the team would be happy to assist. A couple things I wanted to add that we didn't have on here because it didn't really relate to title or to the settlement, but is wiring instructions. With the increase of hacking and fraud, we send wiring instructions secure. Clients get a secure email from Zix Encrypt. We don't ever change our wiring instructions, so if your client ever says, hey, I got new instructions, we don't ever change them. We also ask them to call and verify with us prior, so that if their email does get hacked, Because what they do is there's fraudsters obviously watching on the back end on your buyers or even on their outsourced emails. If they're not secure, and then they duplicate an email, looks like it comes from one of us. And they try to convince your buyers to send the money somewhere else. So we never change our wiring instructions. And we always ask that they verify prior to sending. Yeah.
Okay, separate topic altogether. Can you talk about escrow agreements?
Yeah.
Like, if there's some work that's not gonna get done now that it's winter time, and everybody's like, oh, we're just gonna escrow the funds.
Yeah.
How does that work? What do they need to do? What parts do you do?
Perfect. So what we need is obviously the purchase agreement needs to address the escrow. Then in there, we ask that, well, we hold 1.5 times. We did get one approved the other day. That was not holding 1.5 times. But that buyer is due to all liability. It opens us up to some issues. But we did get it approved. But ultimately, you get two bids from 2 different contractors. We hold 1.5 times the amount until the work is completed. So whether it's title clearing, or like Liz said, to septic. And then we have to receive, depending on the lenders involved, we have to receive the invoice for the final payment. There's a lender involved, they'll go out and re-inspect it. We need the buyer and seller to sign off, stating that they're good with all the work. So there's lots of extra steps when we're holding it.
And on that note, make sure you guys are checking with the lenders first, right? Because like FHA is not going to allow you to escrow unless it's literally weather doesn't allow it to be done, right? I mean, if it's just because contractors are delayed, things like that. So like their title's kind of your second step in the whole escrow process. Your first step should really be with the lender first, make sure that they're even going to allow that amount to be escrowed. Then your second step is the title, see how that works. Is there a fee for opening the escrow?
Yeah, we hold $200, we charge $200 for us to manage the escrow. They are time consuming. Like if we just had one, like I said, they came to us, and the seller has no money, barely had enough to cover the invoice. Obviously it's snowing, they couldn't do the roof till spring. We're like, we've had in the past where we've been shut down because our underwriter doesn't want to take the risk. But because the buyer's mortgage company approved the buyer assuming any overages, they let us go through with it. But it's really unlikely that you'll get that to happen too many times in the future. But
And the purpose for the half, so only the 1.5 times for the bid is, say, in the springtime, if they come upon some unforeseen items that require additional funds, then we've got those additional funds rather than being short and having to go to the seller and ask them for, more money to the repair, whatever it is.
And depending on when the work was started, so let's say the work was started prior to the seller selling it. So they started it in September, we're closing in October. But it's not gonna be done until November, we're holding funds, that contractor actually takes precedence over our mortgage. And that's why there's no way we could not move 1.5 times, because if all of a sudden, like Melissa said, the bid came in $5,000 higher and we didn't have the funds, that contractor would have first lien position over the buyer's mortgage and they would not be protected. If they would file a case and they would go foreclose or something like that, we would have to make good on that. So we're always looking out for the best interest of the buyer.
When it comes to getting the 2 bids, are both parties required to agree who's going to do the work before closing, so that basically you're hiring the contractor for 2 bids, or can they change it if the prices change in the spring and they find one that does it for less money?
Yeah, it's not written into their agreement who's doing the work, I mean, unless it is.
Unless it is,
purchase
yeah.
agreement,
Yeah.
but
I don't expect.
No, we don't care as long as the work is done and that the buyer signs off.
and we have enough money.
Yeah, that we had them where people want us to escrow for hot tubs like over the years and you're like, all of a sudden the buyer's like, well, I don't care. I'm not fixing it. It's gonna cost me more than whatever they had. And, it gets convoluted. So if the lender doesn't allow the escrow, first of all, if the lender does not allow the escrow, we don't hold it. If it's cash and you want an escrow for them to move out, probably not gonna hold it. We're not gonna get into the middle of that.
But there's cases where, we will hold an escrow and the lender doesn't care or, and they're not involved. It's case dependent.
And sometimes the money holds that too. Not us.
Are there deadlines for escrow, like after closing, they have so many months to complete the work? Or is that gonna-
Yeah, you would write it in your contract and then we would put it into our escrow agreement. So let's say it was septic, obviously, we know that it would probably, you'd probably put like July 31st of next year, because we never know how the spring will start out. And it's a safe date to put into the agreement, but it really depends on what it is.
Are you seeing less new construction companies, redo escrow for things like sod and driveway? 'Cause I know there's some out there right now who won't accept it, you have to work with their first lender. So I'm just curious if there's been any uptick in that or anything.
We haven't really had many new construction lately, so.
And that's also, a lot of that city, right, like, a lot of times the city is like our player for the escrow for sod. Versus that, I think about lender.
I know this from work, a lender that requires them to escrow for.
Oh, they won't drive with a lender.
Won't work with that lender
Yeah.
if it's required, so. It's just,
How do they resolve that? Just completed them in.
you can work, if they have a preferred lender relationship, you can work with, and you have to work with their title as well, because of whatever's happening on the outside, but yeah, they won't accept escrow.
You'll often see that with new construction is that they have a preferred title company. They won't even give us foreign and lien waivers to ensure that your buyer's protected. So oftentimes, depending on the size of the builder, we can't even get involved. The cost, like they will provide us the necessary information to give you clear title.
Against the rules.
What's that?
Is that not against the rules?
Yeah,
If
right.
you gotta-
How about these? Do you give a brief explanation of it's
Like trustees deed, warranty deed, personal rep deed, so the warranty deed obviously would be from individuals to individuals. Personal representatives deed is if your seller is deceased, then their personal representative is acting on behalf of that estate, and so if there's certain instruments. That's just drafted a little bit different, transferring title to the buyer, and same with a trustee's deed. If title is held by a trust, then the trustee will execute a trustee's deed. Thinking that they are authorized to sign on behalf of the trust, and there's a couple extra documents that go with it, like a certificate of trust and affidavit of trustee. So really, it's just how your seller holds title or how the seller holds title. Dictates what type of deed is being used.
Is there any impact on the buyer of the certificate?
It's not between the warranty trustees and personal rep.
We're just in the limited warranty
Yeah.
deed is where it's only for the time that the person owns the home, they don't go back.
And that's often utilized in your LLC situations or corporations when they own the property.
So I look on the tax record typically to see what type of deed was the seller purchased it. So let's say it's a trustee's deed, so I put that on the purchase agreement. That's how my buyer needs to take it, correct? So it's coming from a trustee's deed? No.
The seller issues the buyer a trustee being transferring title from the trust to the buyer as an individual.
So it would only be if the new buyer went in and the trust, to the trustee. Okay.
But we're talking about the part in the purchase agreement.
That states sellers providing.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
that.
okay, so
So
yeah,
that part of the purchase
I would
agreement,
still
you
put
would
like
refer to policy being.
Got it.
Okay, yeah, that's correct.
Understood.
But then the secondary question is, how is your buyer going to take it? And if that's a trust, then you've got to let title know right away so that they can get all the right documents and all their requirements met.
Is a personal representative deed issued in the case where someone might be like incapacitated in the hospital or something like that, and they're the executor in the state, or solely when it's like.
it's solely when they're deceased. However, there are situations where someone's making a conservatorship, but that's been established with the courts. So it would more likely be if I was incapacitated, she's my power of attorney. So then she would be signing on my behalf as power of attorney. However, I mean, if there's situations where there's the mental health cases and they've gone through the court system and she's my conservator of my estate, I'm still alive, but, and you don't see those too often, but I mean, that's still, in which case, I don't believe that would be a personal representative deed, because that is, it's more like a conservative deed, but I don't even think that's an option on that. I think it maybe would just be other, I don't think at the time you're listening, you might not know that, but that's something that can always be treated to yourself. You learn a little bit.
Wrong their life warranty.
Pretty much, yeah.
Okay, but talk about a quick claim deed. Is it quick claim or is it quick claim?
Quit.
Oh, with a T, okay, and what does that mean? What is a quick, why would somebody use a quick claim deed?
They're like pushing their interest in the property, so maybe I bought the house with my parents, I'm gonna sell it, they wanna get them off title, I don't owe them any money, they're gonna quit claim it to me, so my husband and I can sell it. Or, like I said, a divorce,
Sometimes people do it to update tenancy. That's not necessarily something we can have a part in, but that is sometimes what it's utilized for.
or to add a spouse. When somebody goes into title by themselves, the spouse automatically has marital interest. People don't realize that. They like to get them added, which is great too, because if they want to be entitled as joint tenants, one of them were to pass, then they would still be entitled and they would avoid probate.
So what if a property is purchased by an LLC? And then they want to bring children in, they want to quit claim to them onto.
That's okay. Yeah, it's totally legal. They just quit claim from the LLC to the children. One of the deeds that we didn't talk about is a transfer on debt deed. You're seeing a lot more of those. What that is ultimately, if my parents were in title, they would file a transfer on death to me and my siblings. And then they're gonna go sell it and they're still alive. I have no rights. But my parents passed away. Now the deed automatically to the house goes to me and my siblings. And we would just provide a death certificate and affidavit of survivorship, and we are the new sellers to the property.
So how does that work with the lender? It's like Wells Fargo holds the mortgage. And that scenario takes place, then the children's name automatically gets put on the mortgage, right? And the same with divorce. You know, you could claim deed it and still hold.
Right,
Yeah.
yes, that's a great thing. If you quickly the property, the mortgage is still filed with both of the names, you're still on the mortgage.
You still have to get to the debt. Yes, don't. Yeah, I know.
Get that.
Sometimes people do it where they're like, they're gonna buy a new house and they're in the middle of the divorce. And we like to remind them, like, you're gonna sign this mortgage as a married person. Your spouse may not sign because you're doing it as a purchase money mortgage, but when you go to sell, you have to relinquish their rights. So whether it's spelled it out in the divorce decree that he's awarded the property with 100% sole rights, and she needs to file a quick claim deed, or the divorce decree is sufficient to transfer. But some people get confused by that. We often see that somebody will sign a quick claim deed while they're still married. So they'll sign it from the husband and wife to the husband. Well, that doesn't relinquish the wife's rights, because she still has marital interest in the state of Minnesota.
Okay, wait, so can you talk about when you guys, so I have a buyer that is putting it on hold. She came to me and said, oh yeah, I'm probably gonna get divorced and I don't really have the money to buy this now, but what would it look like if I did? My response was, call a divorce attorney and find out, but, wasn't quite that much done. But how would that work? Like, let's say they're married and there's a divorce on the horizon. She goes and buys the house without his name on it. He still would have to sign in order for her to sell it.
Unless the divorce decree, unless the divorce essentially is different. So a lot of times you'll see in a divorce decree, it'll award for the house. Free and clear of any liens to him, and it says that the divorce decree, if it's done correctly, says it's sufficient to transfer title. If he doesn't execute a quick claim deed in 30 days. So often he doesn't, and we submit the divorce decree at the time of closing.
So huge, okay, I'm just thinking out loud here, so huge risk in that situation that I described, like she's kind of like with the divorce on the horizon, but nothing started yet, no divorce attorneys involved with it yet. Huge risk on her part that he may or may not, well, if they go through the divorce, he may or may not agree that she gets that property.
Right.
100%.
Yeah.
Which is why I wouldn't advise for one way or another, you did the right thing by telling her to talk for divorce. And then they oftentimes say, well, we don't have a divorce committee, we're doing this ourselves, well, then we won't get one. Yeah, so, I mean, that's where it gets tested.
Yeah, okay, thanks.
Be very careful about all.
Any other questions on these?
Hey, I was going to ask you guys, one of the most common, this is all great information. Thank you guys for doing this. I've learned a lot. One of the most common questions that I think we get on the lender side is, what is this owner's title policy? Why is it optional? And should I get it or not? Do you guys have a good pitch to that?
Obviously, it's a large investment in the property or in it's a large investment. So the owner's policy protects you and your equity. So it dates from the date of the policy backwards, where most insurance forward. So it protects against the unforeseen. Somebody that has a marital interest, somebody that they were single when they bought it, single when they sold it, but yet maybe there was an ex-wife in there at some point, and she comes knocking on the door and is looking for 100,000. She gave it to remodel the house. Wasn't aware that he sold it, and she has rights to it. So it ultimately, it's a safe purchase for a one-time fee. The likelihood of needing it is not that great, but when you do, it's a lot. It's a huge thing.
There's another scenario that comes up for us a lot when people purchase owner policies and say they go to sell and once we do the search, we find out there's no mortgage from a prior owner on there. Those are tough to clear oftentimes, but if your client purchased an owner policy, we can typically go back to that underwriter and have them get it cleared. We actually have one in process right now that we closed back in June. And we're still trying to clear an old mortgage. We're holding an escrow for it, but had we had a copy of the owner's policy, we could have gone to the underwriter and released it, but now it's actually even a little bit more messy. The person is deceased now, so now they have to go through probate to get someone to be personal representative, and then they have to go for court action to get this old mortgage removed. It's just another benefit to the owner's policy. That's when we see the usage most, is when we're trying to clear old title issues. They just get cleared
Quicker than if you just
Quicker
had
than
the
if you-
lender's
yes.
policy.
and then you have to go through the,
In this case, that Melissa's referring to, the loan was paid off, so the lender's policy is no longer valid.
There you go.
So it's not like they could foreclose on it or put an action against the policy. We kept, the woman was in the hospital. We could not get our hands on a policy. Her conservator was not family. The woman didn't have any children. It did not appear that the title company that did the policy even was from around here. It was like an out-of-state title company, and their legitimate was nothing. And so we have over $200,000 of proceeds held in escrow since June that they're trying to get their hands on. But like Melissa said, until they get that probate established, which probate is behind, where they say, oh, 90 days. So just keep that in mind if you have somebody that's
and we come across old unsatisfied mortgages very often. Like it is a big one that we have to clear often. And normally we can get it done, but in the few cases where it's much more difficult,
or the mortgage company's on our business.
that.
Well,
they have to
company,
prove
like,
that
company, you know, or company has been sold
numerous times.
16 times in Illinois. So we went to every one of them that you can see on the track, and it's nothing.
Is there anything tricky that comes up with like closing on a home or the seller had been doing a reverse mortgage? Because I've seen you work in the last couple of years.
Yeah, nothing tricky. The mortgage, some people panic because the mortgage is generally recorded twice if it's FHA. So we just get 2 releases from the lender, so there's a double recording fee. It does take a little bit of time for them to calculate the payout, so the sooner we order it, the better. But we've also ordered them and had it the next day, so it just depends on the program. Are they using it as a line of credit? How far back are we dating? The one, I think the gentleman had taxed, so they all the mortgage due. So.
Yeah. One more thing about the owner's policy, it's an optional purchase with a mortgage, but it is required with cash, because again, we're a title insurance company, that's our product. So, it is required for the cash transaction.
We can't issue a title commitment without issuing a policy. And the only way we could is if we're attorneys and we're not. So oftentimes if the buyer doesn't want an owner's policy, we suggest that they get an attorney's opinion. And then the attorney.
And that owner's policy, Leslie, that doesn't have to be purchased at closing, right? That can be purchased after the fact, or no?
It does have to be purchased at closing. We have had them where people have come back, a couple years later and said, hey, can I add a policy? Where maybe they had got it from a family member, and took out a mortgage at that time and it was treated like a refinance. We can, but it's at the full value. We have to do a new search and it's at the value of the property. So ultimately, we're ensuring that title is clear to the best of our knowledge before we're gonna insure it. That's the biggest thing, like it's truly protecting against, like Melissa said, the unforeseen. Because we do our best to ensure that we have everything, but not everything is always recorded timely to it.
Is there any difference in charges between like working with insurance versus working with an abstract or anything like that?
Nope.
If your property is both, then there's just double recording fees, but.
So you'll see that too sometimes, and sometimes some of the counties are really relaxed, like Ramsey County will record anything. So you're like trying to clean something up and you're like, whoa. Or it's abstract and Torrance, and maybe the stat was recorded in abstract, but it wasn't recorded in Torrance, so you'll see different things like that, asking us to clear that up.
I don't know if that's all on the property.
Messy.
So Torrance is never converted to an abstract or to.
No, so all property was originally abstract. If there was an issue, then it gets converted to Torrance. So in a case where you have both abstract and Torrance, there's probably two parcels in the property. One is abstract, one is Torrance. I just saw one recently, it was an association, like the garages were Torrance, the condos were abstract. So not super common, but clearly there was litigation and something happened that those had to go in front of that. Interesting. But that's what that's about. The other thing I wanted to point out is earnest money. So on the first page of your purchase agreement, it says earnest money is $5,000 and it's being held by the listing broker unless the box is checked. We take that verbatim. That's not the case. You need to check the box or send us a message and let us know. We've received messages over the years and it's still continuing to happen. My check is short. We do all the research afterwards because we don't know. We follow the purchase agreement, we do the research afterwards, and maybe the selling agent has it, or the seller held it in this case, or whatever it might be. Some attorney is holding it. So sorry. So just make sure that the appropriate box is checked. That's it just, again, goes back to the commission thing. So we don't want to mess with anybody's money, and everyone's money is very important. So we just have to make sure that we're collecting and doing everything the way it should be.
Yeah, let's just say as a general rule, if you're doing anything with earnest money that is different than the norm, if you're doing anything other than having the listing broker hold it, make sure everybody and their mom knows about it. Make sure title knows, make sure your TCs know, and then do that again, because it gets really messy if we don't know about it till afterwards, then we're searching for $5,000 and it's never fun.
The check's less than the mail.
And the checks get lost in the mail, and then there are sloppy people. Don't even. What other questions, folks? Anything else? Awesome. Thank you guys very much. We appreciate you. Thank you for lunch. Hang out for a while, come up and say hello, get some food, and we'll be back at noon for the team meeting.